Caste isn't just a South Asian issue. It shapes who speaks, who listens, and who is heard in academic and development spaces worldwide. In this episode of Between the Lines, we confront how caste hierarchies continue to influence the production of knowledge, access to opportunity, and the experience of being in higher education. Hosted by Chandni Sai Ganesh, MA Gender and Development alum at the Institute of Development Studies, this conversation brings together anti-caste scholars and activists Aarti Rajput, Ritu Kochar, and Priyanka Samy. They speak about the silences, exclusions, and resistances that define their journeys in the UK and global academic contexts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode on anti-caste commitments in knowledge production, research relations, and development. I'm Chandni Sai Ganesh, an MA Gender and Development alum at IDS, and today we have three fantastic guests joining us. Aarti Rajput, a scholar pursuing the MA Power, Participation and Social Change degree at IDS, Ritu Kochar, an ESRC funded PhD candidate at the London School of Economics, and Priyanka Samy, Global Gender and Intersectionality Lead at the International Budget Partnership and the Youth Convener at the National Federation of Dalit Women in India. I'll hand it over to you first, Priyanka, to introduce yourself.
Hey, Chandni, thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. It's an absolute pleasure. I identify as a Dalit feminist activist, and I'm based in India. I work in the urban communities in Bangalore, in the city of Bangalore, in the south of India. So yes, happy to be here.
Amazing. Welcome to the episode, Priyanka. Aarti, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity for having me here as a speaker and talking about the things that matters to us a lot, to be honest, and not just us, but we are representing the people and the voices of the people who have not been getting the chance to get heard. So thank you for having me here. As you have already introduced me, I'm pursuing my master's at IDS in MA Power Participation and Social Change, and I'm also a Commonwealth scholar. And currently, I'm writing my thesis on caste as well and caste in higher education. So this would be very relevant for me to incorporate these findings in my thesis as well. So thank you so much, and lovely to meet you all.
Amazing, Aarti. And I think we're all rooting for you to put your dissertation in and hoping to read it. Ritu, finally, would you like to tell us a bit about your work and what brought you to it?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Again, it's just lovely to be here with all of you wonderful women. It's just amazing to share this space with you all. I am what they say is an early career researcher, and my work also revolves around caste and especially caste in higher education and the inequalities that it leads to. And I'm particularly working on how inequalities migrate with students. So I'm looking at inequalities in access to uh, international education and how aspirations are formed among Dalit students, especially aspirations of international education, where this comes from, and how do students navigate the many challenges that they face on this journey. And yes, I'm trying to do whatever I could, my bit of activism through my work. And yeah, just thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Ritu. Again, your work sounds so fantastic, and I'm sure we're all eager to read it. And I love also that you're focusing on aspirations because I think materializing anti caste commitments is an aspiration for all of us here today. And on that theme, I think if we can move on to our first theme, which is caste in the classroom. Aarti, I'd love to hear about your experience of caste hierarchies in UK higher education. Why is it so important and urgent to address right now?
Uh, Okay, so thank you for asking this question, first of all. And if I talk about the caste discrimination or exclusion per se in UK classroom, I feel whenever we start the discussion, I don't know, whenever we start the discussion regarding affirmative action, how that is helping in India to get the marginalized people, whatever field they want to go into. I feel somehow that conversation turn into reservation and merit, reservation versus merit, which I feel is not something that is being spoken by the students from their heart, but from that structure that has been entrenched in them and in me as well. That okay, if somebody is coming from the reservation, that means that person is not meritorious at all. And this is something which always demotivate the person who's coming from the marginalized community, because that person is already fighting a lot, and it takes a lot for that person to speak in class. And whenever it turns into like merit, then they always feel demotivated, and they stop speaking about what they feel. That happened with me last year as well. We were having the class discussion, and there when we were asked, okay, do you think how reservation is helping students or people to get into places, then this discussion entirely started from merit. And this what made me so shocked at the same time, because I feel education places are the places where the seeds of transformation and social change is buried, where things like revolution and thought provoking stuffs always emerge from education institution. If the education system or the institution practice caste discrimination, exclusion in subtle way, or maybe in implicit way, then it would be very hard for a person who is coming from the marginalized caste to actually highlight that. Because I remember one of the conversation I had with Ritu during my participatory action research workshop, where we talked about how difficult it is for us that we are facing discrimination, and now we have to explain it to the people that we are facing discrimination. And these days I feel one of the concern is that why people don't really focus on it, because they still connect discrimination exclusion in the traditional manner. Oh, doing untouchability, practicing untouchability is the discrimination, but they don't really look into the stuff that they do in the daily practice, how they are excluding in conversation, how they are not doing the eye contact with the people who are coming from the marginalized caste. And these stuffs are really being practiced in the higher education institutions in UK as well. What I see these days, the caste has wearing one of the dress or layer of language, of economic stability. And that's how these things are also being extrapolating the discrimination or exclusion that we see here. I end up seeing myself being sitting alone and not having any friend or not going out. It's just me who pressurize myself to be or to indulge with the people as much as I can. But again, at certain point of time, you feel like, oh, these people are not happy to have you, or maybe their behavior is something in that manner which feels like they are not interested in talking to you. You are just pushing yourself, and why would anybody be interested in pushing him or herself on someone? So that's what I found in ideas so far. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Aarti. I mean, I know I especially appreciate how you describe caste as a sort of chameleon experience in the UK, where it takes on a different shape and form, as Ritu argues in her research, in opposition to like traditional forms of caste discrimination. And, I know to tackle a structural issue, it's not enough for me to say that you do have friends here. And this one episode is not necessarily going to address a systemic issue, but it's one way in which we are, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar says, educating, agitating, organizing. And that educating part is such a vital and crucial element of how we bring forward these experiences and then address them in meaningful ways. Um, Ritu, like Aarti mentioned, based on your research and also your lived experience, how have you seen caste discrimination and domination persist in and through education and pedagogy, especially in the university, whether that's here in the UK or South Asia or India specifically?
Yeah, thank you for asking that really important question, because as Aarti said, that there is, you imagine education to be this force of transformation. And I think when we come to these institutions, especially elite institutions, we think it's a bittersweet experience in the way that we find it extremely educational. It opens up your mind in a way that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. But then it's also an experience of blatant caste discrimination and a lot of microaggression in those regular day-to-day life in a higher education institution. um, so it's really weird that you think of this experience as something really educational, but also education reproduces those social inequalities that we see in society. So it's really um, something that we need to tackle. And of course, this is a platform where is one of the ways that we are tackling it, because I think this is that if we don't, that we need to enter these institutions to tackle this discrimination as well, that we need to uh, do something from within these institutions and then bring in that force that will change the social structures. But I think the ways it propagates in higher education especially is through the different people there, through the students, through faculty, through the admin at higher education institutions, and through the institution itself, through their policies. uh, Through the courses, I would say there is not enough caste material, there's not enough anti-caste courses or modules or readings in India, especially. And even here, it's been such a big issue since 2009, since the debates on Equality Act in the UK. But the information is so little, and there is so little in the courses that you still have to explain a lot about caste to people here. It's also the way caste is taught in classes, which is through the faculty and professors, that they talk about it as something which is um, just something that is very academic. Like they have a very academic way of talking about it. And it's really interesting that you would have students in class, of course, who talk about reservation, who talk about merit, and who are the ones who are the perpetrators, and are those people who discriminate against students because of these things. But it's also interesting that whenever people do talk about caste in classes as well, is something that is so detached from them. And I had an I for my research, I'm doing interviews, and I had someone say to me recently that they will talk about it as something which is monolith. Like they will talk about it like they're talking about, oh, Akbar did this and he was that. But in these, and they would talk about like, oh, the Dalits, they do this and this happened. But you wouldn't think like there is a Dalit person sitting in your class, it's their life, and you're talking about it in such a detached manner. So I think that really um, shows that how in very invisible ways caste happens in the classrooms as well. And it's through institutional policies that are very in India, it's a mandate to have SC/ST cells and equal opportunity cells, but not many institutions have it, even though it's mandated. And in the UK, there has been a lot of work going on adding caste to the EDI policies, but there is a lot of resistance from the institutions, which is of course like something similar to what's happening in India as well. And yeah, and of course, like all of us are working to really just tackle that.
Thanks so much, Ritu. I think you highlighted something really important. Something that frustrated me when I was doing my master's was that, of course, there were no anti caste readings in any of my curricula, but also that even if that change does happen, if anti caste readings are inserted into the curriculum, even for a tick box exercise, are there Dalit and other oppressed caste students and professors in the classroom? And that makes a really big difference in how you learn about caste. My most influential learnings are embodied and are shared by those with, I mean, I have experience of caste, even though I'm a Savarna person, because caste emanates from a point of power and violence, right? Um, but to truly like decolonize the classroom, I don't think it's enough, like you said, to just insert anti-caste readings, but there need to be people in the room to within the institution that are actively fighting for this. It is not enough to have the facade or the veil of anti-caste readings or policies, but there has to be something meaningful and embodied there. Thank you so much for saying that. And Priyanka, you write so much about the very caste-based gatekeeping that excludes oppressed caste students and professors from entering the institution space. And these ways of practicing discrimination and gatekeeping have really consequential ramifications for international development and movements. So, can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you confront in your work and how you navigate them?
Thanks, Chandni. So if you look at the caste system for over 2000 years, a central aspect that was systematically sort of denied to Dalits was education, right? It's really at the heart of the conversation. So we were denied the right to read, to write, to enter spaces of learning. So the classroom for us Dalits is a deeply political, historic, a place that carries the weight of centuries of exclusion, so to speak. So today, caste continues to sort of shape who is assumed to belong in elite institutions, whose voice is valued, whose presence is questioned. So for many Dalit students, often first generation learners in higher education, the classroom is not just a place to learn, right? It is a site where we must fight for dignity and survival on a daily basis. So this exclusion, I think it's very important for us to understand that this exclusion is structural. So even today curricula remains Brahmanical. That means it erases and completely invisibilizes Dalit, Bahujan, and Adivasi histories, which are histories of historically excluded people. So something as simple as English fluency is used as a silent gatekeeping tool within institutions, right? We've all experienced that. Mentorship, internship, research opportunities flow within dominant caste networks, what one calls social capital, that we Dalits, for obvious reasons, have no access to. So this cost is devastating, right? If you look at the NCRB data, which is the government data, it shows in 2021 alone, over 13,000 students committed suicide in elite institutions across the country. And as all of us know, many of those students are from Dalit, Adivasi, and Bahujan backgrounds. So if you look at Rohit Vemula in the University of Hyderabad, or Payal Tadvi at BYL Nair Hospital, or Muthu Krishnan at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, these are just, cases that made the headlines. But what is really important is that these are not, individual incidences or tragedies. They are institutional murders because they are enabled by a systemic, casteism, academic harassment, and completely dehumanizing and crushing isolation of being made to feel that you do not belong to this place, right? So the ramifications for that in international development is direct, right? The same gatekeeping patterns determine who gets access to global fellowships, whose research is funded, whose recommendations are taken seriously into policy spaces, right? When Dalit voices are excluded in classrooms, they're also excluded in shaping international development agendas. Forget, let alone international, even domestic agendas, right? So that means the knowledge, solutions, priorities coming from Dalit communities and other historically marginalized communities never reach decision-making tables, whether it's at the subnational level, national level, or international level. So in our work as Dalit organizations, I think somewhere we have really resisted this invisibilization. We really have refused to wait for these spaces to open up for us, because we sort of navigate these barriers by building alternative platforms as much as we could, whether it being, sort of really pushing our way into these global institutions, and to simple things like mentoring Dalits, especially women and girls, resourcing their leadership, creating pathways for them into international forums, and ensuring their research and lived experience are sort of visible, cited, and central to development policy. I mean, we've really tried our best. I mean, there are miles to go yet, but we're just sort of pushing horizons wherever possible, right? And that sort of brings me back to the quote about Baba Sahib. He says, cultivation of mind should be the ultimate aim of human existence, right? So that is why we're sort of dismantling caste-based exclusion in education as a prerequisite for just and equitable development, be it local, national, or international development. So yes.
Thank you, Priyanka. I think you've highlighted something really important about whose knowledge is valued and whose knowledge is not, and what are the processes in which that devaluation occurs. And I'd like to just invite you to just speak more and expand on the global caste hierarchies that reinforce themselves through knowledge production and research relations, especially how you comment on how social capital influences your access to all of these opportunities.
Thanks, Chandni. You know, I often say caste is South Asia's best kept secret, right? Walk into any top university of the world, you will find South Asian Studies department, prestigious research centers, and these glossy conferences on the subcontinent. But ask yourself, how many of these spaces talk about caste with honesty, integrity, and rigor? And the answer would almost be, and more tellingly, how many Dalit professors, Dalit faculty members do you see there, right? The answer is almost zilch, even today, where like it's 2025, right? And these spaces are sort of overwhelmingly dominated by a homogeneous caste group, the Brahmins, and of course the other caste elites who have controlled knowledge production for centuries, right? We're not just talking about 20 years. We're talking about 2000 years of appropriating knowledge, right? So they've ruled the roost, to just put it plainly, in academic spaces. Global caste hierarchies sort of reinforce themselves in so many ways. It could be subtle, it could be overt, like both Ritu and Aarti sort of have been talking about. So when it comes to research funding on caste, that sort of disproportionately flows to elite universities and think tanks led by dominant caste academics, right? Even when the subject is on the lives of Dalit, Bahujan, and Adivasi communities, you see they're the ones who get funding. So community knowledge is sort of mined, it's sort of extracted, right? Often without consent of the ones who are being interviewed, and all of this field work seems very extractive, and then it gets published without any shared authorship or benefit to the people whose lives were studied, right? So the result is a global academic canon where caste oppression is either invisibilized or diluted into cultural differences or framed through the lens of those who have never experienced this. So I just find this so ridiculous, because this is just not bias, it is epistemic violence, right? This sort of appropriation that has happened for so long is violence. It erases lived realities, it completely invisibilizes resistance histories, and keeps Dalit scholars and activists out of rooms where knowledge is validated and disseminated. And for all the arguments that say that Dalit students are not good enough and they don't have that kind of scholarship, they have been systematically sort of kept at the margins, right? So it's not just, if you look at it, if it's just not about representation, right? It's not good enough if there's one Dalit scholar here or the one Dalit professor there. when Dalits are absent in such large numbers from faculty, from editorial boards, or research leadership, the very questions being asked are like not good enough, right? So if Dalits are not in these spaces, then it's never going to be how it's supposed to be. Whole areas of inquiries like caste in global migration, caste in tech, caste in climate finance, all of these very key questions are ignored because the lens and the perspective of Dalits are missing from dominant caste discourse. So that has a direct impact on international development policy, right? Because research informs priorities, research informs program design, research informs everything, right? If there's no data on a particular community, how can there be policy on that? So data is so crucial. It is actually the foundation for any sort of policy or any sort of anything that will come out of it. So if caste isn't there in the evidence base, it won't be there in the solutions. It's as simple as that. So I think in our work as Dalit organizations, we challenge this by insisting on a feminist, anti-caste research or research partnerships where communities define the research question, own the data, share authorship. So that means shifting from an extractive model to one of co-creation and accountability.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Priyanka. There's so many just amazing insights in everything you've shared. And I wish the listeners could see us right now because we're all just furiously nodding along to what you're saying. And I think, Ritu, to just hone in on some of these broad insights that Priyanka has shared about the overall sector of research and development, is there a particular story or learning that stands out to you in your research experience with a specific focus on how knowledge is produced?
Yeah, I'm still sort of processing what Priyanka said because it's just so, it's just incredibly insightful. And I resonate with that so much because you're right, research is extractive in nature. And I think the sooner we accept that, or the sooner we stop sort of, justifying or giving reason to academia that, oh, this is a place of just knowledge production. No, it's a place of knowledge extraction and taking that knowledge from marginalized communities, making it your own and presenting it something that shows, oh, look, I'm working on caste issues. I am the caste savior. I'm this messiah that's going to, uplift this community out of their marginalization. And of course, academics, and this has been the nature, especially in caste studies, that you extract all of this data and then you become a good academic, but how much are you giving back to that society, or are you even taking that research back to the people you've extracted the information from? And it's really, I think, even in the projects, even in, as Priyanka said, even in who gets funding is such a big question that they don't even allow you to do, I mean, they've cancelled MPhils in India, but now they don't allow you to do PhDs if it's on a topic around caste, or if it is speaks even remotely against the government. And that's become so common. And even for the scholarships that you get to study abroad for marginalized groups like SC/ST, landless laborers, they ask you, especially like National Overseas Scholarship, they ask you, if you're being funded for a PhD, that what are the topic that you're working on, and if it is related to Indian culture, like I say, as quote unquote culture, where they mean basically you can't work on caste, especially in an international setting, and they won't fund you. So that's again that's an institutional way of stopping this work on caste, especially from people who are from the Dalit community or who are from other minority groups. And so you don't allow them to work on this, but someone else who can present it in a better, not in a better, that's the wrong word, it's sort of in a more academic jargon way, they're allowed to do it. And this sort of brings me to something, in one of my interviews, someone said something very insightful about this, and we were talking about activism in the UK university landscape. And this girl from one of the tribal regions in central India said that I've born up in a place where Baba Sahib is talked about on a daily basis. I've learned the values of Baba Sahib since I was growing up. My parents talk about it, the whole neighborhood talks about it. And when they came to a university in the UK, they were still talking about it, but they heard other people, especially upper caste, who, were talking about it or using those theories that Baba Sahib wrote about with their academic jargon. And this girl said that, like when I talk to that person, I feel like I'm less of an Ambedkarite because I can't put it in those fancy academic jargony way. And just because I can't do that, and they put it in a way that sounds more academic or that sounds more intellectual, somehow I am less of an Ambedkarite. And she said, we're basically both saying the same thing. We're both like, I would say there is an equality. And she would say something that the university landscape is filled with structures of hegemony and power dynamic. And they become more academic or not academic, they become more of an Ambedkarite than you are because you're just unable to catch on to that language, and that brings a lot of what we see in educational spaces is performative activism. This kind of activism where you either do it for your social media or you do it to promote yourself, but it never results in anything. It only sort of glorifies the person. You've written about it, you've done some tokenistic activism, but what about the people who are looking at you? It's great that you are inspiring them, but is there any structures or is there anything you're doing to actively help them? And I think that's something that we need to talk about in terms of access as well, which is like something that I'm looking at in my research, that who gets to access these spaces and how much caste plays a role in that, because students or generally the diaspora here, people who migrate, they think the caste disappears when they take that flight, and when they come to the UK, they feel that just the caste has disappeared. But even then, you see people. I mean, I couldn't believe. Like, I think this was my first couple of days in Oxford, and there were two people in a dinner or something, and there's one of them was I think they were both born and brought up in outside India, but had Indian heritage. And I see them talk about it like, oh, I am a Kayas. Then the other person goes like, oh, I am this. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe. There's like, are you joking? Like, is this actually happening? Like, you're discussing your caste just so openly, and just no, just it felt like an out of body experience that it just seems unreal. And of course, like after a series of subtle and very visible caste discrimination, I think you just sort of like need to have that lens to see that caste is everywhere in the UK as well. And just some people just choose not to see that. But yeah, I mean, I think this um, presenting yourself in an academic way saves you from so much of the blame or the guilt of being the perpetrators of caste discrimination.
Thanks so much, Ritu. I think just what you said, caste is everywhere, is a really important affirmation that we have to just expose over and over again, because we need to acknowledge that it's not limited to India, it's not limited to South Asia, it proliferates across the world and in all our institutions. And I especially appreciate how so well, you've so specifically identified how the extraction is done, because I feel fellow Savarna academics and fellow Savarna so called activists set the parameters. We build the institution on the labor and knowledge of oppressed castes. And then we claim ourselves to be experts on actually communities that we just parachute into. We don't have any experience of being within those communities we simply extract that knowledge and become the so-called savior academic, as you labeled us, and that's so apt. So, Aarti, within this context of this institution that Ritu and Priyanka have so articulately defined, how do you see us reclaiming or redefining knowledge production in the classroom? Are there any experiences from your own research, especially because you're doing participatory action research, that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I am just I'm feeling so enriched now because of this discussion, because every single thing that Priyanka and Ritu has explained, oh my God, I must say that every single of my feeling was getting the words when they were speaking. So as Priyanka said that caste is there, if it's not there in evidence, then it won't be there in solutions as well. And that's the same thing I found in the classroom. So in IDS, we don't, although we have a lot of majority people from India in IDS, but we don't have a single student from Muslim community in IDS. I'm the only Dalit student, and that too with the scholarship. If I would not be getting the scholarship, then I would have not been there. Until and unless somebody who has embodied that, as you said earlier, how can you define that caste is there or not? What kind of influence it is making in the on the lives of the people? And I remember that I was having a conversation with one of the girl from our batch, and then she applied for the scholarship. I also applied for the scholarship, but she didn't get it. And in that conversation, it was just normal going on, and then suddenly she said that, oh, I don't find people worthy enough who got the scholarship. And somehow it made me felt that, is it something related to me? I mean, maybe through the conversation I'm not that good in English in conversation. Maybe because of that she's thinking that I'm not worthy enough, and that's how, because she didn't get it and I got it, so maybe that's how she's comparing herself with me. But I felt so sad that she's not even understanding the kind of structural barriers we all are coming from. And people who talk about, oh, discrimination is not existing, exclusion is not existing somewhere, how can you know that until and unless you experience it? The people who experience it, only they can talk about it. I know what the demeaning eye look like. I know how when nobody give you an eye contact when you are saying something, how disrespectful it is. Have you experienced that? If you have experienced that, you would understand what do I mean when I say that I'm being excluded in the group conversation, I'm being excluded in terms of even socializing with the people. So that's the kind of stuff I have experienced in here as well. Or in India, it's like very common. In India, I haven't even thought about it. Okay, I would be talking about it in explicit manner. But here, because now I'm reflecting a lot, talking with people and realizing how it is still prevailing. I, in my participatory action workshop, research action research workshop, I had a conversation with one of the girls. She said that people were saying that, oh, we don't believe in caste, and then later on they are having the name of their caste on their vehicle, practicing caste in their daily life, but saying that, oh, we are not caste, we don't follow caste, we don't believe in caste, we don't really support discrimination. But you are doing it in practice. If you are doing in practice, how can you say that? It means you don't really know what actually it entails in the discrimination and exclusion that you are talking about.
I think that's a really fantastic way to think about knowledge production, again, as an embodied experience, something that, when I first came to IDS, something that my professors told me was, in your essays, you can write I, like you can write I am or I did this. And that was completely new to me because in my essays back in India, I was not allowed to use this active voice. And so I find, especially to put myself in that research, really important to locate myself. It also allows, I think, Savarna researchers to not evade the accountability of locating ourselves because we are scholars, but someone from an oppressed caste background is a Dalit scholar or an Adivasi scholar, right? And locating ourselves in that research is so important in that context. And to just close off this episode, we'll move on to what we envision the future to look like. And Aarti, because you did give us that last insight of embodying your own research, do you want to tell us about how you believe education and development practice can be shaped to honor anti-caste commitments within the university or the sector overall?
Yes, I mean, through that, I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we push people to think and reflect and uh, understand their positionality at the same time. And yeah, that's how I decided to do my research on caste specifically in ideas, because I feel like when I would be talking about my insecurity, somebody would resonate with it, and then somebody would talk about it as well. So it would not be ending somewhere with me, but it would be continued to the people who will be coming, and they would be talking about it. And one of the reflection that I got from my cooperative inquiry is that earlier we all, not just me, I mean, I was there, but my co-researchers were also thinking that this is something that happened to them only. So it's that their problem. But now, because we talked in a depth about this discrimination and exclusion that is prevailing in the higher education institution in subtle way, they said that now they are thinking about it. It's giving them food for thought to reflect on their own experiences, whatever they have experienced so far, and see how the behaviors of the other people from dominant caste made them take them some decisions that were not really beneficial for them, such as dropping out classes, not going for social gatherings, and not talking about themselves because that's how they are gaining sympathy. They are using the victim card. So this is how they are reflecting on their own experiences, and they are like, so there is one person who is my co-researcher, and she said that earlier she used to do typo. She was very scared, but now when right now she is in University of Edinburgh. So she said that she had a typo, and then there was a person who jumped into the conversation, and he was questioning her education. So she was like, typo is like normal mistake that can happen to anyone. If you're typing something very quickly, it means that some mistakes can happen. But questioning education on the basis of that is somehow you are dominating the conversation, saying that, oh, you did this mistake, you don't really deserve to be here. And that's how you're perpetuating that structure of caste again. And just to stop it somewhere, I also realized how in Commonwealth Commission as well, this domination or this structure is being prevailing so far. So we have a lot of activities in the Commonwealth scholarship, so we get the chance to attend few of the workshop and few of the stuff. However, I found like there is one or two students who are getting the chance again and again to be, every single event, even if we are applying for it. I didn't get the chance to be there in the uh, insightful activities of Commonwealth that has been organized. So in their form feedback form, I've written that you are selecting, one of the criteria to select these scholars is the language, that you have some questions and now the person has to answer. But you don't really understand what it takes a lot to a person who doesn't have that good command on the language, and you are excluding on the basis of that. We all are scholars, we all should be getting equal treatment. It doesn't matter where we are coming from, but we got selected for this scholarship, and now it's your responsibility to make us all attend all the events so that we can make the most out of this opportunity. But there are only few students who are getting into those events and workshops, conferences again and again, who are very much privileged. And because Commonwealth is not on the basis of caste, so we have all kind of people there. It depends on the leadership qualities and the experiences that you have done so far. On the basis you get selected for the scholarship. So this is what I have written there. And one of the thing that I noticed in that Commonwealth Commission's event is that half of the information is internally circulated. So there is a person who is the regional coordinator, and that person is keeping that depends on the person whether the person wants to circulate that information beyond the group, or just utilize those opportunities again and again. So this is what is happening, and that's how we are prevailing this dominating structure again and again in higher education institutions as well. Yeah.
I feel we could talk for hours on the politics of scholarships and, merit versus this reservation. I find that people who win scholarships are some of the most amazing people to speak to. And Aarti, that is incredibly true with you. And thank you so much for sharing that. I especially appreciate how you envision anti-caste commitments as a collaborative and shared experience where we're all supporting one another through care, through capital, through friendship. And that's so, so important. Um, Priyanka, to move on to you, given the context of our discussion today, what is your vision for these anti-caste commitments? Where do we need to go next?
Thank you, Chandni. Talking about my vision, I think it's most important for caste-based discrimination to be recognized as a global issue, right? Because of the simple fact that caste is not just confined to South Asia. A lot of people, across the globe think that caste is an India problem. First of all, it's just not India, it's South Asian. And now it's no more South Asian because it travels with the South Asian diaspora and is practiced globally from workplaces in the Silicon Valley to universities in the UK. So it deserves the sort of same kind of recognition, urgency, and accountability in international development as race has in global human rights frameworks, right? So this means integrating caste equity into donor policies, funding Dalit-led organizations at scale, and ensuring leadership roles for those most sort of affected by caste-based oppression. So it also means in the context of academia, it also means advocating for earmarked funding for Dalit-led scholarship, including global fellowships, visiting faculty positions, and research chairs in top universities, and so on and so forth. So without addressing caste, we cannot claim to be advancing equity or justice in development. Simply because the system has sort of oppressed over 200 million people, and they will continue to have or lack access to these institutions. They will not have access to dignity, to voice, until this caste question is addressed in a substantive manner, right? And the African American feminist scholar Patricia Hill Collins said the most effective way to subordinate a group is to control the knowledge about them, right? And like I said previously, caste-based discrimination is South Asia's best kept secret, for the same reason that the knowledge about the Dalit community has been controlled by the oppressors, right? So breaking global caste hierarchies in research, in academia, in development, or any other sector, including tech, is about dismantling one of the most enduring systems of oppression in the world, the caste system. And we need to name this over and over again until, we receive, as a community, the Dalit community receives substantive equality and redistributive justice. So thank you. Thank you, Chandni.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. It's such an honor to listen to you. I can't express my gratitude for everything that you've shared today because you've highlighted so precisely the mechanisms that keep the structures of power maintained and exactly how we should be moving forward and breaking down those structures. Finally, Ritu, over to you. You're a founding member and president of the Ambedkar Society at the London School of Economics, and you are building what Priyanka has briefly referred to as an anti-caste counterculture in UK higher education. Um, do you have any insights on what your priorities are for the future, where you'd like to see this counterculture travel to?
Thank you. And you're being very generous in describing what I'm doing. I think it's very, I don't know, at this point I feel it's very basic work. But I think just with the society for now, I think one of more immediate priorities are to get the students who are coming in this year and helping them just settle in a bit, because I don't think, and again, it's a lot of that social, cultural, and economic capital that we don't have, that we don't know how to just navigate a country abroad. Most of us, like I hadn't traveled abroad before I came here for my master's. So I think that's one of the priorities, is to make those students just feel settled so that they don't have to navigate the many things that come with it in the UK, and they can just get on with their education. And already I think a lot of them are on scholarship, and knowing and having been talked to a lot of students, the scholarship is very inadequate in terms of just finances. They don't get paid enough. So just making sure that we can support them in those initial few weeks, I think that is the first priority. And then so we and then I think the second one is a continued part of something that we've been trying to do at LSE. A couple of students, we started, we petitioned in to our student union to add caste to the equality, diversity, and inclusion policy, and we were able to add it to the student union. We proposed that, and of course, like Chandni was there as one of the speakers, and as one of the people to support it. But yeah, so we were able to pass that, and this year we would be talking to the student union a lot more so that they can appeal to LSE, and hopefully we can add caste as a protected characteristic to the larger institution. And then I think from there on, it sort of hopefully in the future added to the larger University of London, and hopefully sort of take it to more universities, and we can learn from a lot of places like SOAS. I think I don't know if Edinburgh has it, St Andrews or something. I think they have caste in their EDI policies. AHRC, like Yashaswini is a really good friend of mine. She's at Leeds. She was able to add it to the AHRC, which is a scholarship for arts and humanities, UK based, to add caste there. So I think it's just continuing all of that work that just all of these lovely people are doing, and just building on their efforts, and just be grateful for that there is some groundwork that's already been done. Like I think Oxford has Oxford University College Union, which is a union for all the faculty members. They added caste to their EDI policy. So I think we're just building on that work. And I'm also working with some UK-based anti-caste activists, and they are trying to work on a national level, trying to add caste to the legislatures. So yes, I'm trying to just work with them to see what we can do to add it to a couple of other unions. So the activists that I work with, they have been I think they petitioned, and they have been talking to a lot of trade unions and a lot of other unions to be able to add it to their policies. And I think once we have support from a lot of these unions across the UK, I think there will be a stronger case to add caste to other policies. So I think there's some really I'm just excited to see that happen.
Thank you so much, Ritu, and congratulations on that huge policy win. So much hard work and effort went into that, and really big congrats on that. And just overall, thank you, Aarti, Ritu, and Priyanka, so much for your time and insights today. I've learned a lot myself, and I hope the listeners have as well. The movement is made of lots of friendships and lots of tiny actions every day. And I think this conversation has really highlighted that. So I'm really looking forward to that anti-caste movement and anti-caste counterculture taking root across all of our institutions across the world. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share to help us spread the word. Do you have a feature that you would like to appear in a future episode? If so, then email betweenthelines@ids.ac.uk.